tap, tap in. Tap, 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 tap, tap in. Welcome to TT from the D Tap In Tuesday. I'm your host TT, and I am super excited that you decided to tap in with us for Tap In Tuesday. I'm pretty aware that there are several other platforms and podcast shows you could have tapped into, but you chose to unpack tonight with us, and we are super excited. It is always my pleasure and my honor to bring forth amazing individuals who are educated, smart, witty, charming to say the least, full of knowledge, and love to share with others. That is one of my reasons. That's one of my pieces of my why, if I could say that. And tonight's hot topic is diversity, equity, and inclusion, but unpacking. We've talked about this before. I have one of my guests that actually did this with me. This is my first time doing a live stream with this subject. I did the last and my first diversity, equity, and inclusion with one of my guests that's on tonight, Miss Kelly Kuhn from MNA. And so it was an amazing show. I had a lot of great feedback from that. And so tonight, in light of this, what's going on around the globe, it's not just one specific situation, although we will unpack one, but it's just something that is something we need to talk about. It's almost like the elephant in the room without saying it's the elephant in the room. And I think one of my other guests, Dr. Laura, probably going to get me for saying it like that, but that's okay. So with me being active, I'm super excited. So excuse me while I kind of unpack myself, because when you have a lot of power on a panel like I do tonight, it's amazing. Every woman, one thing I love about it is that I realized as I was pulling this crew together is that every one of these women, including myself, is a CEO. Won't you say that? And you know why I say it like that? Because women have a lot of power. And a lot of times people don't look at us with power. You know, there's some aspects you might say, oh, yeah. And then there's some you might say, no, but never forget that a person started somewhere. Okay. Where whatever burdened our hearts, our spirits, and set on our minds, we actually were able to form it like clay, how God does us every day. He shapes and forms us every day and smoothing us out to do exactly what it is that we're supposed to do. So with that being said, let me bring in these queens because they are beautiful and each one of them are on a very busy schedule. And I'm grateful that they took time out of their schedules to come and unpack with not only me, but with you tonight, because it's not about me. It's about us. Okay. So my very first guest, I'm super excited to welcome. This is actually her first time on the show with me, but I've done some amazing work with her. And we met by way of a mutual friend, and she's such a beautiful spirit. I was nervous when I spoke to her the very first time, and we spent I think 3 hours on the phone, just unpacking, getting to know one another. And by the time I ended that call, I felt like I've known her for years. So I'm going to bring my very first guest to the panel, Miss Rena Risper. Hi, Rena. You're muted. You're still muted.
You know, you got to get used to all this, but I'm so happy to be here today.
Thank you.
This subject matter is something that we really need to talk about, especially given the issues that are going on today, whether statewide, locally, and nationally, and globally. It's a discussion that we need to have. So I appreciate you bringing me to the table today.
Well, thank you. It's my honor to have you on board. I will be right back. As you know, you have some more amazing guests, and this is gonna be a hot show, y'all. So if y'all not ready, you better get ready, okay? And you know that old saying, you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. Okay. So next up, I'm going to bring forth another amazing woman who I've known for quite a while as well. I This woman, like when she gives a hug, it's like one of those hugs that kind of just bring you, you know how we walk around and we mask a lot, right? And we're like, oh yeah, everything's good. Yeah, everything's good. Well, when you hug her, it's something, and sometimes I used to avoid her because I met her by way of church. So we have different type of connections. And it's just that strength, that aura. And then just knowing the path, seeing her grow and everything that she's tapped into unfolding is like watching a butterfly just take flight, right? All these beautiful colors, and you just like to watch them go and go. And when they land on something, you kind of sit back and just kind of watch. And so I'm excited to have this queen with me on tonight. She's a repeat offender as well. And without any further ado, I'd like to bring Miss Darnisha Calvin on. Hi. You muted too.
Hello.
Hello.
How is everybody?
Everybody's well. So thus far, this crew, these two, but we had some little sisterhood a few minutes ago. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you for coming on. Oh, well, thank you.
Here.
Thank you. It's about to be a powerful hour. And when I bring all of you ladies on, then we're going to go around and do a proper introduction. I'm going to do a little bit different. Normally I give a whole little spiel, but I don't want to do that tonight because every woman in here is just full of power. So I think I'll be doing a disservice on tonight if I did that. Nobody can introduce somebody better than themselves. So I'll be right back. I'm going to go get my other two sisters, okay? Be right back. So next up is, like I said when I was doing my introduction, if you were on, I was saying the very first time I did the diversity, equity, and inclusion unpacking, I didn't do a live stream. I don't think I had visual capability. I might have, I can't remember. But this young lady is the CEO and president from MNA. And so Rena Risper is partly responsible for me being able to get that interview lined up, but it was this lady, this wonderful woman herself who made it possible. She made sure her calendar was good. Shout out to Tammy Pitts. She's a beast, a queen. Thank you, Tammy, for pulling this together. Appreciate you. So without any further ado, I will bring Miss Kelly Coon on board. How are you?
I'm wonderful. So happy to be here this evening with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. I was saying, when I did this, Kelly, do you remember when I did this, when we did the diversity, did I have visual or was it, I just couldn't get the schedule?
So I think it was, I'm not sure if you had visual yet, but I have 5 children at home. And I think that we were wanting to ensure that the noise that would typically, because I was working from home at the time, that would be in the background, that I could be in a place uninterrupted. So it may have been very much me. That was the reason that it wasn't live.
Okay, well, no, it's all good because we did it then and we're going to do it again.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would trade spaces because I'm actually at home. I would come where you are and do this show if I could. So yeah, I've not been where you are, but one day that's on my bucket list. A very short-term goal, but seems like I've never gotten up there, but I can't wait to get up there. And I'll let you tell the people later where you are. So I'm gonna bring my last queen now. This is a funny little story. I met Dr. Laura. I stalked her like on Instagram. I actually saw a piece that was on a news clip, and then I was interested. And so it was like, I think the cover of her book caught me. And this, even though this is a different platform, but it was that made me go to her page. And then I was just kind of scrolling. Now you scroll, you're like, let me see what they're about. And you're like, oh, I'm gonna follow her. And so it was just like, as I started to build my guest list, I'm very strategic. For those of you that are new listeners, whether you're by way of YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever you come for, I always selectively pick my guests, right? Because I can do a show all by myself, right? But when I bring someone on, that means I've done my homework and I feel that they have something to offer, not only myself, and I don't like to be stingy with information, knowledge, and wisdom, but other people globally. And our show goes all over the place. I'm thankful It's been in Italy. It's over in Bahrain. It's heard in a lot of places, which I was shocked because I'm thinking like, what, little me? Okay. So when I get the guest on, it's amazing. So without any further ado, I would like to bring all the way from Fort Myers, Florida, and she kind of cut out on some classes for me tonight. So I'm super excited. Dr. Laura Streffler, how are you?
I'm good, and I'm not muted.
Woo-hoo!
I was looking for the little click.
I know you did good. You did good. I want to say thank you first before we jump into the introductions for all of your time that you're giving up tonight, because I know you're working as we do this. And so I'm grateful. I think that our listeners and viewers, no, I take that back. I retract that. I know that our listeners and our viewers will gain some knowledge and wisdom and even maybe some education tonight to cover some things that they probably wondered. And I'm hoping that people will log into their Facebook accounts, because if they want to ask you ladies questions, that's the only way I'll see them. So like if you're over on YouTube, that's perfect. However, if you want to ask these queens questions, you would have to go through StreamYard.com/Facebook, log into your Facebook account, and then come back and find us. And then you can shoot your questions off. And I'm sure these queens will answer any question you have that's related to this topic tonight. So we're going to do a little round robin introduction. First up, I would like to ask Rena Risper to please tell us about who you are and what you do. And
My name again is Rena Risper. I'm originally from New York City, and now I live in Lansing, Michigan. I grew up in a very diverse Caribbean American household. And so when I moved to Michigan, I really had to learn a lot about African American culture, especially the migration of individuals from the South. And I still have not been down South. But what I've learned, I thought other people should learn as well. I learned a lot about the Latino community in Lansing, Michigan, because when I got here, it's like, why are there so many Mexicans here? Where are the Puerto Ricans and the Dominicans? And so I used my sociological base as a way of providing stories to individuals for an inclusive understanding. Whether you want to understand or not, the information is out there. I publish a newspaper. I've been publishing for 21 years and have learned to work my way through the rabbit holes, through the groundhog holes, any hole that I could get myself out of, I have done it. We really focus on diversity, especially within the Black community. And I have found that recently I am really concerned about what is going on throughout the country and in Michigan. I also have a nonprofit, TNCP Can, which is we have a couple of things we do. We do poetry programs, we do health programs, we have a Stop the Violence program, and we also have Diverse News Association, which is how I met TT from the D. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate you. Next up, we're going to have Kelly Kuhn to tell us a little bit about herself and what it is she does.
Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Kelly Kuhn. I'm the president and CEO of the Michigan Nonprofit Association, which is a new title for me, but I've been with the Michigan Nonprofit Association for about 14 years. But just in January, I ascended into the president and CEO job. And I am a native girl from Flint. That's where I was born and raised in Michigan. Always lived in Michigan, and I am the mother of 5 children, including a senior who graduates later this week. I'm actually up, on her way to be a Spartan at MSU.
Okay.
So, and since TT has mentioned, I am currently up in Mackinac Island, which I know everyone thinks it sounds amazing, which it is a wonderful place to be. But I'm up here for the Mackinac Policy Conference that the Detroit Regional Chamber holds annually. And we're up here with lots of other people from Southeastern Michigan and all around the state, actually. So we're connecting and advocating on behalf of nonprofits. I've only ever worked in the nonprofit sector, so I do not know any other sector. And I think nonprofits are really at the heart of community. And if there is a need in community, I believe in my heart that you will find nonprofits right there addressing needs in community. And so I'm a fierce advocate on behalf of nonprofits and the work that they do all across Michigan. And that's a little bit about me. So thank you. So glad to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being able to show up while you're on an assignment. So I appreciate that. Next up, we're going to have Miss Darnisha Calvin. We're going to have her come on and tell us a little bit about who she is. Well, Mrs., I don't want Brian to kill me. So, yes, a little bit about who she is and what it is that she does.
Hello, everyone. I am Darnisha Calvin, and I am the CEO and founder of Dawn New Awakening. Dawn actually is a service for counseling, therapy, group therapy, substance abuse, counseling and therapy, and then life coaching. Life coaching is the part that I added kind of last after I went through all I went through. So I actually started off as a business major, graduated with my bachelor's in business with a major in management. Always knew I wanted to run something, but didn't really know what. And so from the spiritual aspect, I went to divinity school and received my degree in pastoral counseling because I knew that helping people was a passion of mine as well. And once I went, they told me that I had to get the other side if I wanted this to be my day job. So I went back and got my master's in clinical mental health counseling. So I have both sides of it, which has been a blessing. And lastly, the life coaching. So it's a blessing to me to be able to help others and be able to share alike in the things that happen in everyday living. The substance abuse has been a big piece of it, along with dealing with the different diverse groups of people that struggle every day on a day-to-day basis with what they're going through. So I'm blessed in that area and love what I do and glad to be here. And I actually met TT, as she said, through church, and that has been a blessed friendship, relationship, sisterhood that we have. And so I'm grateful to be here.
Well, thank you. I feel the same way. I was telling them about them little hugs you give, them dangerous hugs. Whoo, child, if you don't want nothing to come out, don't hug her, okay? If you want to keep it to yourself, just don't. It's like you feel, and I promise you cry, like get the ugly cry, and you just, and you feel much better though. But I've learned, like, you don't want to kind of do that to people all the time. If you can hold it and kind of unpack it differently, because then they end up carrying that clothes basket of stuff, and we don't like to do that. Well, sometimes, but not all the time. Okay, so next up, Dr. Laura. Oh, I need you. Let me tell you, but before you talk about who you are and what you do, as I said earlier, and I like to say this when I bring you up, because Laura is like almost like a co-host because she's been on here so many times. But Laura kind of did me the way you do me, Darnisha. It was like, but it was through talking. I interviewed Laura the first time, and she was out, and shout out to Laura's husband for letting me borrow her that day because they were getting ready to go out for breakfast, I think it was, which ended up turning into lunch talking to me. And so we were doing an interview. And so when it was all said and done, I texted her because I was so grateful. And I didn't realize I was getting some therapy. I didn't realize it, right? And I remember Laura, she texted back and she said, if you ever want to talk, I'm here and there's no charge to that. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take you up. And I looked at the phone at first and I thought like, she saw me. I was like, and we didn't do a visual. We had audio. So I was thinking like, oh my gosh, she saw me. Like, and it was just like we talked later on, and I realized like she good. Like this girl is good. She all the way in Florida, and I'm already here. And so from there on, it was just like a safe, like you feel safe. And so with that, it made me always want to reach out whenever she's available to come on, because what she has to offer, what she gave me, which she didn't know, I want other people to be infected by it as well. So go ahead, Laura. Go ahead. Tell people
My
about
heart is smiling. My heart is smiling.
all is well.
Yeah, I'm Laura Streffler. I'm not from Michigan. I live in Florida. I am a licensed mental health counselor. I've been doing clinical work almost 35 years. So I've been doing it longer than maybe not since some of you have been alive. A lot of times when I do podcasts, longer than people have been alive. My PhD is actually in human services. I kind of am into Save the Planet. I worked at not-for-profits more than 25 years, mostly domestic and sexual violence, human trafficking. Now I have a private practice. I sat for almost 7 years on a human relations review board, which is the EEOC review board for discrimination and that kind of thing. So it's something that's near to dear to my heart. When I was working in the shelter, in addition to clinical duties, I did a lot of things with INS, worked with a lot of immigrant victims of domestic violence, and you can't be deported if you're a victim of domestic violence, and did evaluations and worked with language barriers and all sorts of things. I am also the Jewish girl that married the preacher's son, and my husband, who 60 years ago was adopted from Korea. So I have an Asian husband with a baby that looks like a test tube baby, that when I was pushing him around in the carriage, people would say, "Oh, he's so cute. Where'd you get him from?" It was my belly, so I get that, people don't always understand. And again, I've spent time, I've worked in the projects, I've worked in the jails, I've worked in the trenches, I subbed at the high school, I've taught college. I've been really blessed where I've been able to be in almost every arena. I do expert witness testimony. So every arena that's available, I've been able to kind of walk in. And in 35 years of being in the trenches and talking to people, I'm very honored that they shared their secrets and their pain and the things that have happened to them with me, which has given me a really different perspective than just book knowledge or, things that you read about in the paper.
Awesome. I told y'all, ladies and gentlemen, that we were going to have a powerful team tonight. So, all right. As we unpack, start to do this with diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm gonna single out for 1 second Kelly, because that's her expertise. Like that's what she's known. But Kelly, with you being the president and the CEO over at MNA, I would like to ask you. I want to see your professional perspective as well as your parental perspective, to break down what DEI really means.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And I just want to acknowledge that, I'm on a lifelong journey of experience. I bring my experience, I bring my perspective, I bring my heart as a mother of 5 children to the conversation. And I am honored to be amongst all of you power women, as TT has talked about, and want to make sure that we're mindful of all of the different places and perspectives. And certainly I will offer mine, but I feel very privileged and honored to be in this space talking about this subject with all of you this evening. So thank you for the opportunity. At the Michigan Nonprofit Association, as I mentioned, I have been with the association for now 14 plus years. And in the time that I've been at the association, there has really been a deep and strong commitment to diversity, inclusion, equity. And we actually added justice to our values in 2019. And, you know, those of us that are on the team still, just think back to that time frame of the work that we did of building an intentional culture at the association, of honoring diversity, inclusion, and equity at that time, but really thinking about and grounding justice in there. And of course, that was in 2019. And then when we think about the death of George Floyd, we think about the pandemic and all of the other things that have risen to the top about the disparities of things. I think the timing of that value and the journey that we were on as a team to really recognize, not only as a team, but a board, to recognize how important it was to add justice to our values. And, you know, we're committed every day to live out those values. And I think one thing that is really important is that I don't think that that people can separate those values in a workplace from their personal values, right? If there's the conviction around those personal values, then it shows up everywhere, right? So diversity is diversity of thought and lived experience. Equity, meeting people where they are at and ensuring that they have the resources and the support to align with those needs. And then, of course, inclusion, creating a place where we are all welcomed and bring those perspectives and our authentic selves, right? And I think for us, justice at the association is really key, because when we think about the work of nonprofits being so grounded in community and meeting the needs of community, there are a lot of things that are not just in the world. And I don't think that as a state association that's working and supporting all works of nonprofits across the state, that we can't be committed to those values. But again, I go back as a parent of 5 children, 18, 15, 9, 7, and 5. So there is a range. We are graduating a preschooler as well as a high schooler in our house, right? And so you can just imagine the conversations that we have and the things that we're thinking about, that the senior in high school is learning and understanding and is about to go into this world on her own and be independent. And then thinking about the preschooler and just the way that even in this window of time of raising children with that age range, what perspective and what experiences they're going to get in that time frame, right? Like what the 18-year-old is understanding and experiencing will not be the same thing that the 5-year-old is, right? And so I just think that it's really important, to offer that perspective. And again, when I think about the commitment of just understanding the world, this raising children, and just thinking about my own personal commitment to living out those values, both personally and professionally, it's really, really important.
Very well said. Thank you for sharing that. Rena, I'm going to tap in with you from a journalist perspective. I know you see a lot and you meet a lot of people, and you're from a diversified family and environment. What is your perspective on DEI?
Can you be more specific?
When you look at it,
I'm just kidding.
I know.
Diversity, equity, and very interesting. That's my eye. From the perspective of a journalist, if we look at it from the way that we feel about things, the equity and inclusion is only when we die multiple times on television. I believe that I've seen George Floyd die at least 200 times. Ahmaud Arbery, more than George Floyd. So when we in the media have to think about death and dying and equity, inclusion, most of the times we are dealing with vicarious trauma. And what I mean by vicarious trauma is we see a lot. We're the first on the scene. Not only are we the first on the scene, but we might be the first to see the body coming out of the burning building, or we might be the first to see the deceased child on the seashore who fell out of the boat that the migrants were using to come across the sea. And it's disturbing. And so that is from a psychological point of view. Now, sociologically, the way that we interact with one another is another story when we're dealing with mainstream newspapers and the way that they pick and choose what they want to report on. So when you're thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion to some mainstream, that means let's just focus on the news stories that deal with cultural activities such as parades, parties, or business stories that one person had to beg for a whole year to get, thinking that that story is going to pull them through the lack of success because they got that one mainstream story. It is quite interesting now. I've seen this whole shift in the media reporting on crime because we're becoming a society where we're not, and I get it, I totally get it that young people's brains are not formed and that they need a second chance. But when you are the person who is doing the story on the parents and the grandchildren who no longer have their parent, who are being bullied in school, the brother who OD'd because his brother was murdered, and you have this person who didn't get a gun charge even though he shot the person to death. So we have to deal with a lot of issues. We also have to deal with being attacked by people because right now, nobody has any decorum right now. I'd say a lot of people do not have decorum. When you're attacking teachers and doctors and nurses, it is time for us to really figure out who we are as human beings. So there's a lot of vicarious trauma going on to the point where if someone sends you a photo, you don't even know if it's real or not. You have to check the metadata to make sure that someone isn't going to change the focus of the photo so that you don't get sued. It is a lot of stress right now being in the media and really not having a voice. This is probably the first time that I've been able to express, the types of things that we go through, to the point where I had to turn off the television because it was psychologically putting me in a place of depression. And media individuals go through a lot of depression because we're up all night, we're writing, we're trying to do the best that we can, but we get little respect in the inclusion portion of the media, especially when it comes to print media and visual media. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Dr. Laura, from a clinical perspective, seeing such a broad, I know you deal with all kind of people from all over the place. How do you see, how have you seen in the last year alone have you seen in the last year alone any change with this DEI whole thing? Because it's like a movement. It seems like everybody wanted to focus on DEI. They want to focus on SEL. And so it's, you put it out there, but clinically speaking, how do you feel people are adjusting with it?
Well, I think one of the things the pandemic really, magnified for us was the need for connection and, people connecting, but it also made people feel powerless. And I think when people feel powerless, unfortunately, not everybody, but there's a portion of people that want to feel more powerful and they prey on other people. And whether it's racial, whether it's cultural. I live in Florida right now. We have the Don't Say Gay bill. Kids, under third grade, they can't they can't say the word gay. So if they have same-sex parents, they can't even talk about it. So there are all sorts of messages that different groups of people are getting that's saying you're not okay. And they are okay. And people are struggling enough with anxiety and depression, and especially kids. I've never in 35 years seen it like it is now. People really not even wanting to be on the planet right now. And when they need, I'm getting chills as I'm even saying it, when we need to be more connected, we're more polarized than we've ever been. And unfortunately, what I see is sometimes the legal system, is not the justice system. It's the legal system. Occasionally it's the justice system, but sometimes it's not about what happens. It's about what they can prove. And if they can't prove it, or if they can something out of it, and that can be even more re-victimizing, because egregious things happen to people. And then it's almost like the system says, well, too bad, so sad, we couldn't really do anything to them. Unfortunately, I believe in integrity. I mean, I think the ethical thing, the thing of integrity, that people should do things, but not everybody's me, and I get that. But what I'm seeing is now, because people are wearing cameras and everybody's got their phones everywhere, tapings, people's behavior is changing. There's something called the Hawthorne effect. And what the Hawthorne effect says is, even with no intervention, people's behavior will change just because they know somebody's watching.
Wow.
And somebody's not only watching, they're taping. So now it's not a he said, she said, they said. It's a I have it right here. So people are finally being held accountable, or at least a little more accountable, because it's being posted on social media, and people are saying this is not okay. And the system can't ignore it. They can't say, well, it's the way that it's always been, because there's a collective consciousness, especially with younger people, that are saying, you know what, we're not going to live like this. And a collective consciousness is a very powerful thing.
Wow.
And I think if you looked at any individual, we all have, whether we're Black, whether we're white, whether we're Jewish, whether we're Buddhist, whether we're gay, whether we're physically, emotionally, mentally challenged, we all have something that somebody could point a finger if you want to pick things apart. But when people are feeling uncomfortable, then they find somebody else and they pick at them, like the fifth grader bullying the third grader. And I think if we tend to lift each other up and empower each other, rather than saying, oh, look, I'm better than you, this is no good, we'll be looking at a much more connected world. We're so concerned about technology overrunning humanity, but in so many ways right now, humanity is overrunning itself.
Wow. Danisha, being a life coach, I know you and Laura have a lot in common with the clinical therapists and things of that nature, but being a life coach and having still young children, not elementary age, but young adults in college, getting ready to go to college. How have you how have you had, from a parent's perspective, putting the life coach on the shelf for a second, and being a parent, how have you had to interact to make sure that they were prepared to deal with such things?
So when I look at everything that's happening and being around a lot of young people, even though my children are that young adult age, just thinking back to them like growing up, I think a lot of stuff happened based on the basics. And what I call the basics is how people were raised, if they had morals and if they had values. And so for me, it was instilling that in my children, no matter what was happening around them, so that they would know, the right from the wrong. I think that somewhere we lost that. And I think when you talk about diversity, equity and inclusion, that is a big part of how people are taught and the things that they're given as resources starting young. But I also feel like it being lost, what I mean by that is that we were born into a diverse world, just to start off with. We then had to be put in a place to understand what equality was, and the equity of equality, being that everybody is involved. So I think participation, the DEI kind of like goes with the participation on every level from every person, irregardless and no matter to what your race, your gender, or your age is. And I think that that piece right there has been split up. So I think even though they say that, DEI, you have to do it in every area of your life. And so doing it in every area of your life, the workplace and, education. So in the school, in the church, everything that circumferences what your life is about and what you put yourself into to participate, your work environment, what schools you send your children to, how you actually, engage in whatever your choice might be, Christianity, like Laura said, being Jewish, or, whatever your race is. I think that the core piece of that was the basics. And I think that it got separated and put into all of these factors where it turned into a training. And I feel like them making it more like a training. Now that I'm an adult, I have to get a training on what it is for diversity, what it is for equity and what it is for inclusion, makes it more of there's a separation. And to piggyback on what Laura said about the way people are feeling right now since the pandemic has happened, the more separation that happened, it made it feel like everybody had to be seen. So people are doing things and reaching for things and trying to be, everything, instead of just being in the norm. And because everybody normal is different, no matter how you were raised or how, you were born, your normal to you is normal, but to someone else, it might not be. So I think it was just a whole big piece of me making sure that I was included. I made my children inclusive in everything across the board, didn't separate it. They knew about every race, they knew about cultural things, they knew about differences, even down to them traveling to different places, different parts of, the United States and the world. They have traveled, just making sure that I made them aware, inclusive, understand how important they were to society, and then making sure that it was pivotal for what they would do for their future.
You know, um, that was well said. There's a couple pieces I can tap into. One, I grew up in a diversified neighborhood, so much so that my community, there were a few African American families. So it was just like I guess I didn't really know or care. I don't know, but my neighbors would be Chaldean and Muslim and Hispanic, right? And so going and learning, going to mass with my friends that are Catholic, like I'm going in like, but I'm going to the Baptist church. I'm going in the Christian. It was just like, okay, I knew the etiquette because I was taught, as you said earlier, morals, values, right? My mother's like, you love everybody. You treat everybody with respect, with love. And my mother, and I can say this humbly, respectfully, my mother was a maid. And my mother would take me with her to go and clean people's homes and things like that. And so a lot of her clients were Caucasian, right? And so it would be like I would play with their grandkids, right? So it's just like they coming up from up north in the summer and they're coming down, and I didn't know, like they didn't. We just played. We were kids, right? But as I started to get older, I started to adapt to other cultures because I was identifying with it, but I also was put right there at the banks where I could walk out into the ocean of diversity, or I could sit back and say, well, I don't really know. I was one of them kids like, I want to see, I want to learn. And so as I got older, that was my path. When I became a parent, I made it my business to raise my children the way that I was raised, right? And so did I encounter racism growing up? Yes. And I didn't know how to act with it because I wasn't taught. Now, while I was learning to love everyone, my mother didn't teach me how to respond to racism at me. So there were plenty of times when I got caught up, like I've been called the N-word trying to do something nice for someone, and I'm stuck like, what? And then my friends are like, what? And I couldn't even tell my friends what was said because I didn't want them to act out a certain way because they were, my friends, and they might have felt like I need to protect her, but it was just a stun, like, why you call me that? Like, I literally did this, and it was something good, and you didn't even say thank you, but you called me that, and I'm looking at you like as a kid, like, what? Like, and it hurt me. I knew I was hurt. I didn't go home and tell my mother because I didn't know how my mother would handle that, but I was thinking like, what kind of mess, And so as I got older, I learned how to create that alter ego. So there was Teresa, and then there was TT, right? TT like, move out the way, I'll handle this. Teresa like, no, we're gonna do, she want to talk it out and all that. And so TT like, I don't think so. And so, I had to learn that on my own. But then as I started to have different job titles and moving around, I was always in a diversified environment. I remember going to, this funny, but it ain't. It's funny. I went to one school in Highland Park. And Laura, you're not from here, so you don't know. But Highland Park is, at that time, 95% African-American, right? And when I moved there, I remember being in class and I'm waiting on I was the new kid. So I'm waiting on everybody coming in. And I hate to say this, but I was like, why everybody black here? Right? That's what I thought. I think I was in the first grade. I'm thinking like, why is everybody black? Like, why? Right? And I'm like, I didn't say it out loud because it probably would sound ignorant, but it was just like, where's everybody else? Like, I'm not used to this, right? So I went home and I'm like, Mom, all the kids is black at school. She was looking at me like, what? But I was like, I'm not used to this. And it's funny, but it's not funny because my youngest son now, Cody, was always the only African-American kid until he got to 6th grade this year. So it was kind of like, and Cody, like, he was kind of like me, but he knows because I was able to teach him what I wasn't taught. So letting him know about different cultures, engaging, and he loves people and people love him. But we had to have that conversation about racism because it started as he got older. He's like, why is this happening? And what is this? And when the George Floyd piece went on, I took him to his first march. And, we out there marching, he got the sign and they caught my child. A journalist was like, can I take a photo of him? I'm like, yeah. And so it made it to the newspaper and made it to the news. And he didn't understand. He's like, why do you want to take a picture of me? I was like, because they want to take a picture of everybody. I was like, you're cute. And so I was like, but you're out here and you're learning at an early age about unity, right? So yeah, I can go on and that's a whole nother show. But I do want to, I was trying to pull up a clip, but I couldn't upload it. My husband is my engineer and he wasn't able to get this. So I do have this still shot that I want to share because I want us to unpack this. And this was the case that made national news. And I learned about it waking up. You know how when you grab your phone first, well, for me, I'm bad at this. Grab my phone. Let me see what happened while I was asleep in the world, right? And I'm like, what? Because this school's around the corner from me. I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Maybe there's another school somewhere with the same name. And I'm like, what? And I had just had good conversation with a friend who getting ready to send their daughter there. And I'm thinking like, do you know about this? So this was the case, Roper Public Schools, which is a private school, actually. It's a private school. And it caused a lot of heat because we saw this, right? A teacher thought this was okay to give to the class to say, which of the following primates, like check all of the primates. And it's kind of like, but you put Barack Obama on there. And so that really brought a lot of tension. And there's a clip, I wish I could have gotten it, because they got to interview the director of Roper. They got some feedback from the teacher's perspective. And I was shocked, like, really? And it took me back to something you said, Darnisha, kind of like, so you need training on how to not put an African-American person on a piece of paper with some monkeys and almost cussed. I'm working on that. But I was like, what? Like, what rock you live under? Like, what were you thinking?
Not only an African American person, the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, and what kind of message is that sending, even to other people that the president of the United States, it's kind of a double whammy, but one because of the African American. I mean, if you're a Darwinian and believe we all came from monkeys, then put a bunch of. But just to put that one picture was totally not only unacceptable, but almost an abuse of power. Because if somebody in the workplace had done that, that would have been discrimination. But because that teacher was teaching the young, it was a lesson. And it sounds like it's the teacher that really needs the lesson.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally when I saw it, thought about abuse and trauma. Like, that's the first thing that came to me. Even beyond the fact of having an African American there, the abuse and trauma that would be seen from a young person's perspective who had all of this good feeling, I should say, about who Barack Obama is, and how even sometimes you're not exactly taught like a lot of differences between a lot of different animals, but to have him placed there and then traumatically cause confusion. I mean, okay, so what are you really saying? And then to put them in a traumatic mindset, like you said, an abusive mindset, to think that, okay, this is either directed toward me, is directed toward, even if it's not someone that's my age, it's directed toward people who are my parents' age. Like, there are so many things that could have been taken away from just this one thing, even if the teacher never had to say a word. Right. So if the teacher never spoke, this spoke volumes, and teacher never had to say a word, but it created all of these emotions, all of these feelings, all of these thoughts that could really, really be detrimental. So.
And I think, and I'm sorry, I'm taking two turns, but, I think the other thing is, Obama was thought of as kind of the alpha black male. I mean, for a black person, he's the president of the United States, the cream of the crop, and kids are looking and saying, if they're saying he's not good enough, what kind of chance do I have?
Right.
Wow.
Definitely trauma.
Mm-hmm. That perspective. Kelly, I'm gonna tap in with you, and this is a question I don't know the answer to, so I've said let me ask this here. Do you feel that the type of trainings that you guys have at MNA is something that school systems could adopt and learn from?
So while schools aren't necessarily our primary customer, we support charitable nonprofits, but I would think that there isn't anything special that we're talking about and training on. And we've done some cohorts this past year in particular, and other things that any individual person couldn't benefit from. So I don't want to say schools. We don't work with schools. There's other associations that work with schools that would provide maybe in the formalized training capacity, right? But the content that we're talking about and the things that we're convening nonprofit leaders around, anybody, right? I think that as I've been listening to the conversation, I think it starts at the individual level with each one of us, recognizing and making a commitment to learning and understanding. I mean, so, when I was thinking about some of the other responses around, values that we were brought up with and the values that we're teaching our children, right? Part of that is recognizing and celebrating differences, right? But understanding what those differences are in the first place. But I think part of the other issue is it is those differences that get the spotlight shone on them that then as if those differences are any less, that those differences are inferior, right? Or like it's about how you're taught and how those differences are brought out versus celebrated and recognized, right? Because any difference that somebody has wants to be honored and celebrated. And if you're not aware and thinking about that commitment to learn and have that understanding as a parent, how am I expecting somebody else to do that for my child, even at a school? Like it's my responsibility as a parent to lean into that, to embrace that, but to be willing to be like, not even willing, to naturally want to talk about it and celebrate it. And in my own right as a parent, be willing to honor and celebrate the differences, but actually recognize what the differences are to be able to engage in the conversation so that then you're, again, I don't know if I'm articulating this well, but that's what came to mind for me. I think the other issue, while we're talking about the school example, is there's a lot of people who didn't think that was a problem in the first place, and that is a problem. Like that visual for some people were like, I don't see what the big deal is. That's the problem. That's the problem is right. Is like so. That there's not even an understanding of why that is a problem, and they're like, I don't understand, like then you have to go on to explain it. Like I feel like that's a large part of this problem that we have, is that there are individuals who are helping to inform younger generations and other people's opinions, but aren't even seeing issue with it in the first place, to then be able to again, recognize and celebrate the differences, and then teach somebody else how to recognize and celebrate the differences. I think that was a big piece that I found problematic, was just this recognition of, because I was in a team meeting one-on-one with somebody, and they asked me, and we happened to be in the community right around the corner from the school having breakfast. We were just doing just an informal meeting together, and she didn't even have to go halfway through the explanation. She didn't have a visual for me. She just said, did you hear about the news? And I just remember, and I knew exactly where it was going before she even got halfway through the story. But there's a lot of people who were like, so explain it to me, like, what's the problem? And you're like, what? Like that I feel is part of the issue that we have here. That's what keeps me up at night, is that you actually have to go on to explain why that's a problem.
Yeah. I feel like, Rena, from a journalist perspective, a lot of people took that story and they ate it up. I try to understand. I know, like, if it's a story and everybody knows about it and you get there and you're on the scene, do you ethically, morally have a duty to say exactly what it is in your perspective and your professional opinion? Or do you just table and say, hey, this is what they're talking about, this is the mainstream, so let me just pretty much take what they're saying and just run with it and report the same thing? Or do you feel like you're obligated as a journalist to see what happened and do your own investigation to bring some type of conclusion?
You should always do your own investigation. the reason why people do not do their own investigation is because they paid $2,000 to the Associated Press to run the same story so that they don't have to do the work. So
Wow.
you can write an opinion piece, which is mostly why minority newspapers don't have the same stories in them, and they're geographically based because we don't have a system to disperse stories that are going on around the country, which we have just begun to actually do that through the Black Media Initiative. So we created an association called the Link, and in the link, we share each other's stories. For example, about bail bondsmen keeping people of color in jail in Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa. So that's one of our cohorts. We have one in Los Angeles, Atlanta, the Black Wall Street Journal, the Cleveland Observer. There's a newspaper in Minnesota that really has done some interesting articles from the perspective, not from the Associated Press perspective, but from the perspective of the community that they actually serve. We have Little Africa, which is from New York City. We have the Chicago Defender, and also another newspaper in Texas. And we have just begun the process of sharing each other's stories. And I will tell you that half of the things, and of course the New Citizens Press newspaper, but half of the things that are going on, I just, find it so interesting. And even just having the conversation about, do we actually print what a person has been accused for and was in jail and the case was dismissed? Do we actually print that because it was dismissed? So we've learned from the mainstream that, yeah, we just go ahead and print it. We print the picture, we do everything. And we might have also learned from the mainstream that when a person sends over a photo of someone who is deceased, they may send over their mugshot instead of a family picture when it comes to more African American males. So these kinds of discussions are not going on in mainstream newsrooms. To be honest, I'm just going to say it. Sometimes I think that mainstream newsrooms have kind of been radicalized by people who overdo what diversity, equity, inclusion is. Diversity and equity inclusion has no relation to hurting people who look exactly like you because you were trying to get your point across or you wanted to go this way. In all of us, there is something that is different. And in the news media, it's getting to the point where, like I said, we are starting to repeat, especially when it comes to Black males. This is why I had to turn off the TV and start focusing on other things. Like we did a project for Michigan Nonprofit Association about redistricting.
Yes. Okay, I'm sorry.
If Michigan Nonprofit Association had not contacted me to get information out to 10 other newspapers in the state of Michigan, I would not have known the impact that redistricting made. I mean, I was following it like, it was my kid going to college. I was like, okay, here's the maps. Okay, the maps aren't good. Okay, what are they doing with the maps? What's the new lines of the map? Who's going to be my... And without that, without them doing that, TT, would you have been
No, no, I wouldn't have known, but I was on that train with you, and I learned so much about the remapping and the redistricting and the lines. Like you said, I interviewed some amazing people. And what started out as an assignment, it was just like I ended up getting stock in it. Like I really felt connected, and I could have intelligent conversations with people, and I could educate some ignorant people as they were talking. Like, what? No, that crosses into the other community. That ain't even a district. And then when I got on, when former Chief Ralph Godby was running for a seat in a district, I sat in on that team, and I was excited because I knew the district. I'm like, oh, so I see you now. And I said, oh, okay. You know how sometimes you do something and you don't know it's attached to a greater purpose? Me being a part of that, you couldn't have told me I was going to be on a campaign team months later, but that helped me have an intellectual viewpoint on the mapping and redistricting.
So what I will say about that is, Kelly, you're doing a fabulous job, because for the most part, if I were to go to another organization and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, they would try to feed us breadcrumbs. They would say, we want 2 ads for the price of 1. And then they put us all in a corral, all the Black newspapers together, and just hand out minuscule dollars here and there when we're the ones who are doing all the work, and then expect us to do a great job. But it doesn't work that way. It works when you pay people what they are worth, and then it works because you are working with people who are passionate about supporting a community or communities or cities that we live in. That's how it works. And I had to mention that because I know as much as it impacted me, it had to impact TT, because I said, you have to come on board, because I consider TT as the new wave of media, whether it's talk media. We still have to be inclusive of talk media in the Black community, because a lot of people don't have the time to watch TV. We either want to listen to it. And you know what? In Ingham County, we have a very high illiteracy rate, which is one of the reasons why my website is translated from text to voice. A lot of people don't understand that there's all these different things that we have to pay for in order to teach our own community how to become more educated about it through the media. Thanks.
Wow. That's a whole nother show, Rena. I'm going to do something on that. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Donisha, do you think children are being given the necessary tools when you counsel kids? Do you feel like they're given the necessary tools from your perspective when you hear how they're dealing with things that's going on in school to actually navigate?
No, I think that it's not cookie cutter. And I think that you can go to school, you can get the book knowledge, you can learn, everything that you need to learn from that perspective, but then you have to learn the child. Like there has to be a part of you that understands the child. Like when I mentioned earlier about everybody normal being different. My sons had a friend who cursed all the time. He was a young kid. And so people would be like, oh, his mouth is just so nasty. And he just talks so nasty. And so I would always tell my children, never pick up the habit because you know what you've been taught, but never judge because we don't know what he's been taught.
That's good.
And so in that process, we ended up being able to meet the parents. And when I tell you that those parents, the mother and the father, spoke to each other and every other word was a curse word,
Wow.
it hit me. This is what this child learned.
Yeah,
This is normal to him.
that's his
So
norm.
when he's communicating with other people, that's his norm. Like he's not being disrespectful or he's not, that's a learned behavior of how he has learned to communicate. So me teaching my sons not to judge, but yet not to pick that behavior up. A lot of times when I speak to young people, whatever they might be going through, depressed or angry with their parents or hurting, having trauma, feeling like they can't get things out, putting them in a safe place first
Mhm.
allows them to be vulnerable. And most children have no idea what it means to be vulnerable. They don't even know what that looks like. So, in a setting of a school, in a setting of a place where you have the diversity going on, you just want to belong, you just want to be a part, it's easier to pick up what you see, and it's easier to follow the person that plays the leader, and a lot of that can come with pain or trauma. It's like being a part of a gang. When I talk to, because lately I've been doing some work with some young people who are inspiring artists that are struggling. They want to be the rapper, they want to be, the person that's seen that's up front, but behind the scenes, they have so much hurt, so much pain, so much trauma. They rap about it, but they can't talk about it. And
Mm.
so I've been doing some projects with them, and what I'm finding is that it's the actual fact that I have no place to share this. And it's because I cannot be vulnerable in those places where there are a lot of people. Everybody's different. Everybody's doing something different. And what I say might be misinterpreted. What I do might be taken the wrong way. And then I have to deal with all of the name calling and all of the things that come along with me just being me.
Yeah.
So meeting the young people where they are is a big piece of them being able to move forward, and they don't have that. Nobody accepts me for where I am and understand that my norm can be different from yours.
You know what you saying that, and then I'm gonna ask Dr. Laura about that paper we saw that clueless educator shared with her class, and I thank God for the twins. It was some twins that got a hold to that paper and took it home and was like, "This made me uncomfortable." Because I can't imagine if my son, being African American, was with one of his friends. Because like, shoot, 95% of Cody's friends are of other ethnic groups. If they looked and said, "Hey, Cody, that's you," then how would my son feel? Like, you said I'm a monkey? You know what I'm saying? Laura, you taught at a college level. How on earth did that PDF go from, imagine this. Imagine you're doing you give out a syllabus, and then your assignment is to come up and talk about primates. And this group, because allegedly, okay, I love that word allegedly, there were two people that did a team assignment and they submitted that paper in college at Duke University. Let's just put it out there because it's been confirmed. I'm not saying on some hearsay, that's facts. Okay, it's been proven to be facts. So they said, this was the response from Duke, though. I said, what in the Lifetime special? They said, we don't know how that got on the Cheryl drive, basically, right? Like, we didn't know that was there. We snatched it down. Huh? Like, what grade did those two young people who was in college? Because it made me think this is like a domino effect. If you submitted that paper and you thought that was okay, and your professor, there was nothing that happened at that point, but it made it to your website. I don't know how that happens from a college person. I've only been a college student, not an educator. So how does that work? Being a professor, you get this paper and your class, your students said, "Okay, Dr. Laura, here's our assignment. This is our introduction of primates," and you see Obama on there or any black male or black person, because as we know, and this ain't just hearsay either, this is facts. They like to people, other groups that don't understand, and I don't understand. Like I don't know. You hear all these cruel things. We're just who we are, right? We're just human beings. And so it's like to be put on a paper or labeled and say, well, you belong to the monkey family. Because I'm going to tell you, I'm mature, but I ain't that damn mature. Okay? I ain't that mature. How does that happen? And how would you handle that as a professor?
If a student brought that to me?
If that was an assignment that was presented to you as a professor at a university, how do you handle it? And how did that paper, how would it made it to the website where I can go and say, hey, I'm going to go, and everybody don't use Wikipedia, but some people don't know that. But Google Scholar, when we go, you're supposed to cite your references and all that, right? APA pop in your head, like APA format. So you cite. How does that make it up there where this teacher could grab it out of there and bring it into this day and time right now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I thought you was going to pull that out.
I mean, you know, I guess, and this, I don't know how much of this is my personal thought and how much is my professional. So I need to put that out there because it's so egregious to me that it's really, you know, hard. And just because somebody goes to Duke and is educated, that doesn't mean that they're not a racist. You know, education doesn't make you not a racist. It makes you educated. You know, Mark Twain once said, I try never to allow my schooling to interfere with my education. You know, some people have plenty of schooling, but not a whole lot of education. That being said, you know, I guess the best case scenario is that there was some kind of leak onto a website and somebody posted it covertly, you know, because there's, excuse me, especially, you know, I don't know what other word, but, you know, there's an asshole in every bunch, you know, and somebody put it out there. And if you're looking for something, you're going to find it, whether it's on the dark web, the not so dark web, you know, you're going to find it. If somebody's looking for a controversial or a racist assignment, they're gonna find it. If a student brings something to a professor, I mean, I probably won after I would say, what exactly are you trying to tell me with this? Or are you saying that all humans came from monkeys? Because, you know, is this if you're talking about Darwin, you might want to include a few more humans and of different people. And really explain the hurtfulness of it. I think there's a lot more stuff like that out there. I think people have been pulling it out and doing things like this for a long time, but because of social media, again, it's being outed. People aren't getting away with it. It's kind of like disclosing sexual abuse. It's not happening any more than it used to, except now people are talking about it. The secrecy is, you know, being unveiled. These kind of assignments have been going on for decades, but now people are talking about them.
Okay, that's good.
Well, it's really not good, but
I mean,
we're talking about it, you know, and it's good that we're having this conversation and we're saying that, you know, that it's hurtful, that it's not okay, and that, you know, somebody, whoever turned in the assignment might have some type of, again, proclivity or racial something, or something that somebody, it could be their picture on there, you know, there by the grace of God go I. It could be anybody. And we need to stop thinking of people as us and them and as we. And until we do it, there's going to be lots of examples, and people are going to keep getting hurt until somebody stands up. There's a pastor, and I'm gonna, this is from memory and it's from a long time ago, so I apologize for only telling half the story, but at the Holocaust Museum, there's a pastor, there's a passage on a poster that talks about, and they came for this group of people, and I didn't stand up because I wasn't one of them. And then they came for these people, and I didn't stand up because I wasn't one of them. And then they came up for these people, and I didn't stand up because I wasn't one of them. And then I'm getting chills again. And then they came for me, and there was nobody left to stand up.
Mm,
We need to stand up for each other. We need to be a we, not a you and a me.
I agree with that. Whew, I like that. I think I don't feel that you could have all the training in the world, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Laura, when you said that you could have a lot of education and still not, like, a lot of schooling and still not learn nothing, right? I've met and I've known people that have doctorates, and I'm thinking like just dumb as hell, and I'm like, what? Like, how did you get did you do the classes? Did you actually attend? Did you do online? Like, I can't understand how you are even doing this. And you can't judge people always by that level of education. This
Well,
teacher, I'm not shooting her to the cross at all, but it makes you, and it's one of the reasons why I thought I wanted to go into counseling, right? Because my background is criminal justice. So I thought, like, I love the way the mind works and I love people and I want to understand them. But it's kind of like it's almost like a Rubik's Cube. It aligns initially, and then you start to mess with it. And then it's like it's hard to kind of figure people out.
well,
You know?
but people like her, and I can say, as an old white lady, people like her make it really hard for somebody like me. I was going in years ago when I was working with teenagers. I did, all the domestic violence, kids that were arrested for domestic violence, or basically any kind of violence. So I went into the projects and I was working with a young African American male who lived with his father, who was who had been arrested for battery on a Leo, on a law enforcement officer. And so he had to have anger management counseling, and I was the shrink police. So I went in to, work with this kid. So I get to the house and he gives me a look, and I looked at him and I said, "You're looking at me like what you be knowing about my life?" And he started laughing and he said, "You've been doing this a long time, haven't you?" And I said, "Yeah." Because of all the people that came before me that judged him, he was so sure that I was going to do the same thing. That I was there, this old white lady going in there, with my fancy, which I wasn't, I don't knew better than to wear fancy clothes, but that whole thing. And so again, it's separation everywhere. So people that are turning out papers like that make it harder for those of us who are in the helping profession to help, because it's more racial polarization.
Kelly, when it comes to your training for your organization, have you ever encountered someone who you said, okay, you don't belong, you can't do this work because you have no clue what diversity, equity, inclusion means? Like, no matter how much training you was given, you saw somebody like, how are they here? Like, you're not cut out for this. Have you ever encountered anyone like that?
That's a great question. I would have to say yes. Concrete examples that come to mind, no. That I can think of. I think when we're thinking about the work that we're doing as a state association and the work that we're doing, across the state, I think we're mindful of, again, how we're defining our values, how we're looking at partnerships with intentionality. And so, there's vetting that happens, not saying that those that we have vetted are perfect in any way, but certainly aware of, their own personal philosophies or their professional philosophies, their lived experiences, right? I think for us, it's about ensuring that there's all different perspectives that are embraced when we're thinking about working with vendors or trainers. So I think we're extremely mindful of that. In some ways, we have vetted some of our partners directly on our own staff, or so we've had some experiences there. But certainly there are those that I would say are not as great as others. But there are certainly those that are are really good at it. I think you know, the evolution of this work. So just being mindful that I think every day there's a lesson, every day there's new understanding, every day there's opportunity, right? So if somebody wants to say, oh, you know, this is a tried and true model that we've been doing for 10 years, I might raise my hand and say, really? Like, have you been modifying it? Have you changed it? Because, you know, again, I use the example of the experiences of my own children, you know, 18 and going into the world, and 5. And, you know, there's plenty of opportunity ahead, and just thinking about how the world changes day to day, let alone. So I just, you know, yes, there's certainly, but I think it's more about a philosophy. I think it's more about an understanding, right? Grounding in some of those like foundational components, where I think that when there's alignment there, I don't think it's necessarily about us, you know, dictating a certain way that the training or the information has to go out, but more or less the partnership mentality, you know, the working in collaboration, the lived experiences. I think those are things that are concrete attributes when we're wanting to make sure that we're helping others who, you know, are along for the journey. And I think that that's important. I feel like there's multiple layers to this. I feel like there's the individual perspective and the individual understanding that any one person needs to go through. And when you think about, you know, a work environment or a school environment or a philosophy, in the end, it all comes down to individuals and how individuals think, how they respond, that make up community. And I think that, you know, those are some of the things when we're talking about and working with those that we want to have other nonprofit leaders, whether they be BIPOC leaders, and the needs of our BIPOC leaders are different than the needs of our white leaders. And so we're, you know, even ultra mindful. You know, we talked about vulnerability, we talked about safe spaces. And, you know, in these times, and in particular, when we think about nonprofits, you know, nonprofits not only, you know, bring the burden of their own work, they bring the burden of those that they're serving as well, right? And that's deep. And so really thinking about and being mindful of having those spaces for people to be vulnerable, for people to have shared experiences that they can dig deep into. I mean, all of what we've been talking about really just, you know, spoke to me in that way. And I think that's the philosophy that we're thinking about when we're working with anybody who we're trying to bring along on this journey, is just the recognition of how important that is. And again, meeting people where they are and really understanding where their needs are. And I don't know that that's in a textbook per se. I think that's about experience. I think that's about, you know, this intentionality of wanting to be part of the change. And I think that is, in the end, certainly there's those that don't have that as part of their work. But I think those are the attributes that we look for when we think about anybody that we're, again, working with our nonprofit leaders, especially when we think about how important nonprofits are to community.
Thank you. Well, ladies, I've held you over almost a good half an hour over, and I do apologize for that. But you guys are on fire. And I don't believe in stopping it when it's good. It's not like you were just rambling, like, okay, like, come on. It was like, this is good. I almost wanted to say, hey, we're going to have a 2-hour special. But I was like, yeah, we really wrap it up. Not so when you got a whole bunch of educated women who have a lot of knowledge to share. And I really feel that some people will sit back and have a second view of this, because we unpack some things. And it's good where it's conversation that needs to be having in the privacy of people's own kitchen, homes, offices, workspace, places, wherever. I've heard the word safe space tossed around tonight a lot. It's important for people to have those. In closing, I would like for each one of you to kind of just give some advice to organizations, your peers, on how you feel that we can take what we know and do something different. Because there's a saying, and I know Darnisha and Laura, y'all probably y'all, Rena, Kelly, y'all probably could do this too, but I know from a clinical perspective, I know they say, you know, if you do something over and over again, I love when I do public engagements and I speak, I love to use this analogy, right? Because especially when I look at the demographic of my crowd, I'll say, hey, how many people like Freddy Krueger? You know, you seen, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street. Of course, I'm an old head. I'm old, right? So people like, oh yeah. And some of the young people like, what? Like Freddy versus Jason? I'm like, okay, no, put your hand down. So it's like, there was in one of the parts where they were driving in a truck and it kept going around and kept going around. And me as a little kid in the theater, I'm like, they already seen this already. Why are they? And then it took Nancy, right? Shout out to Nancy, who wasn't getting killed by Freddy. But anyway, so she said, wait, stop. We've done this already. And she realized they were in a nightmare, like they were in a dream. But it's kind of like in life, if we keep doing the same thing over and over with the same outcome, when do you stop and say, wait a minute, this is not working. This clearly not working. With that being said, we feel like a lot is just not, it's just not working the way I think we would like to see it. And so, as someone said something to this effect earlier, some people, I think Kelly alluded to, some people say, hey, I don't see nothing wrong with it. Like, what's the problem? Some people don't recognize when there's something wrong, while other people are sitting here saying, hey, we need to change this. You're going to have a lot of resistance, but then I think majority would say, let's move forward. Let's put the resistant ball to the side. What do you say? What advice do you give, Rena? We'll start with you, to people to help take this, what we know, and make it better.
Ooh. Well, what I would say is to focus on what you were doing. Focus on what you were doing. There's so many curveballs. Just duck and get back to what you are doing. Because sometimes there are just people who are not going to change. For example, I had a boss once who would not respond to my concerns that the representative was using the term nigglets to define Black children who came into the office that I was working at. And no matter how deeply offended and hurt I was, he was not. So I said to myself, I have a choice at this very moment. Either I'm going to let it get me to the point where I'm losing my job, which a lot of Black people and people of color have to do, including people of other religions as well. Or you could just continue to do your job and search for another one as soon as possible. But that still leaves you with trauma. My next thing I would say is that sometimes you can't take everyone personally, and that's a lot to work with. And I'm looking at it from the perspective of being in the media as well. For a short period of time, I had to take another job in order to keep up with the job that I love to do, because I couldn't, we were getting breadcrumbs. So it's really just focus on where your passion is, try to teach and continue to love in the way that you love. But right now, with everything going on, people getting carjacked in Lansing, Michigan, I'm like, what is going on here? Young people shooting each other, the gun stores being broken into. And if you imagine if you took half an hour out of every day to talk to your girlfriend about everything that was going on, you would really not be focused on what you could be doing to allow the universe to work in ways in which become positive for you. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Darnisha, same question.
I would say, I think it's something to the words or when it's spoken to say, be the change you want to see. I think that the focus piece that Rena talked about is so prevalent right now, not being swayed to the left or to the right, but staying focused on what it is that you've been placed here to do, your gifting and what you are called to do. I feel being the change that you want to see or be is the best thing that can happen, in a sense of you being an example. So I feel like the more that people are reaching and looking for this thing on what to follow, how to be, how to act, um, if they see it and they see it repetitively, like you were just talking about, TT, with the whole going in the same place, going in a circle, and it's not working. If we could switch that mindset to going in the right direction, being focused on what we're supposed to bring to the table and the change, then they'll see a lot of that too. And I think that that's where we mess up at, in trying to um, be things that we're not, but also becoming consumed. I think a lot of people become consumed with everything that's around them. And so when you become consumed, when you become overwhelmed with the things that are happening, you kind of just adjust to it and sometimes become it. So I think that it's real critical to just be in that place. If you're working toward being the change that you want to see, then a lot of times people see you in that way. And just the same as negative things can make them gravitate to it, so can the positive.
Thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, I have a couple things that come to mind. One, I think it starts with recognizing privilege, and just being mindful of that. And privilege comes in a variety of different ways. I think when I think about privilege, I think also about we talked about, and Darnisha inspired me. We think about the way that our parents might have even raised us, right? And we think about how we're raising our own kids. And I was always taught that if you had more, then you should give back, and you should give to others who don't, right? Like that's just I think a general rule in life that I hope people will take to heart. And it's not always money, although in some cases that helps. It isn't always materialistic things. It's access, it's advocacy, it's those things that I think about in the spirit of the conversation that we are having here. And then the last two things is certainly be vulnerable, and be kind. Those are the things that came to mind that I was inspired by in this conversation. It would be the advice that I would give.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Laura?
Well, I definitely was hearing Denisha and be the change you want to see. And I mean, I think we have to think about what we can control, and we can't control other people, but we can control how we respond to them and what we do. And we can be bitter or we can be better. And by showing people, we can either be proactive or reactive. People are going to be who people are going to be, and until they're not. So what we have to do is, every time we become reactive, then just like, again, the fifth grade bully with the third grader, or the bully that, and they know they get to you and they pick on you, it empowers them. If you disempower them by not reacting, eventually, well, it might get worse because they'll get pissed that they don't have, but they'll get pissed that they don't have the power, and then they'll try something else, because they do what works. And when it stops working, my mentor, and I was actually just spoke to him yesterday after many years, and I said, one of the things I remember that you taught me was every behavior has a positive intent. So even negative behaviors, that's because somebody's not feeling good about themselves, or they feel powerless, and they're doing really negative, antisocial things, but maybe they're coming from a really vulnerable place, some need that they don't know how to feel. And to understand that And if we start being more proactive and what's the word? Not mentoring, coach, what's the word? When you show somebody, so I'm having a brain freeze, it's late. You know, when you come to doing the behavior that you want, role modeling, that's it, 2 words, that's why I only find one. You know, you start role modeling the behavior that you want to see in the world and that you want people, and you start being it, not just expecting other people to be it, instead of feeding into the negativity in what they're doing, because that gives them more power. They're feeding off your energy. It's like that Jack in the Box that they can wind you up and let you go off, and they see, oh man, I had the power. I could do that to you. I have more control over you than you have over you. You need to take that power away from them by knowing your own power and, you know, tapping into your own power and using that, and know who you are, because you know what? When you know who you are, nobody can tell you differently.
Nice. I'm excited, ladies. I can't wait to this, the show when it comes. I'm gonna make sure I put that hot link out there for people and just keep putting it out there. You talk about change, and I kept hearing that as you ladies summed up what you have to say, your imparting words to our listeners and viewers. All I saw was the word change, right? Change. And it's kind of like change your mindset, change your disposition, change the way you think, change the way you look at things. And even for some people, they could have had a change of heart, like after tonight's conversation. This is something that can be talked about, needs to be talked about, not just here on my podcast, but at the dinner table, at the family functions, when you're talking about it, because people talk about things quietly or they talk about it loudly. We're talking openly right now. There's people that's going to have conversations that's going to be the opposite of what we're talking about. Believe it or not, they're really sitting, and there's going to be someone that says, well, I don't know why that's a big deal. Or why do we want to be having diversity? We shouldn't have that. You still have people with those mindsets. And it's a taught behavior. I've literally seen it. I know people who are African American who this is gonna sound crazy, but where it's kind of like you got the dark against the light, right? Like you're not pretty because you dark skinned. You're not pretty because you light skinned. Your hair is coarse. Your hair is this way. You speak a different language. You got a little accent. All these things. And I'm like, but at the end of the day, Laura, you said something, instead of it being how do you say it? It's like it's a us. It's not a you. It's not a them. It's a us. It's a us. You know, I'm that girl that you coming for one. I'm not going to just run this way with this group. I'm like, here, what just took place. I mean, we could talk about all these things, but what just took place, I'm thinking I worked in a school for like 11 years. And every day, those kids were my kids. I don't care where they came from. Even the kids that got on my nerves. Like if something happened, I felt like no man left behind. And I've ran into places of establishments as an adult after other adults when there was shooting going on, knowing damn well you're taught to retreat, right? Go. And while everyone's leaving, I'm thinking like, what about that? I gotta go, and I'll go back in. But I said, okay, third time might not be the charm. So I've done it twice. I don't plan to do it a third time. But I said, Lord, if it was a kid or someone I love or somebody I know, and I feel like I could help, if I feel like against my better judgment, TT gonna go back in. Teresa gonna say, we ain't doing that. But TT gonna say, we going back in there, because they're in there, And I say all that to say, the way we look at life, we're here for a moment, right? No matter how old we are. I'm knocking on 50. And I'm like, if it's the Lord's will that I'll see 50, great. That's the plan. That's my plan. That's what I hope. And beyond, of course. But it's kind of like, serve your purpose. We all have great purposes attached to us, right? We unfold it every single day we rise up. If you don't do anything that's going to help make things better the next day, then you're really not exercising the gift that you have attached to your purpose. That's how I feel. Like tonight, you ladies are using your gifts. This little did you know that this is attached to your purpose of why you woke up on today, what you chose to share with people you don't know across the globe. It's not just locally in our cities, in our states. Across the country, there's people that listen to this show and can see it. And we don't know how it will affect someone. The things we're talking about, people may be grieved in their spirits and say, I want change, and heard something that said, that's what I didn't know. Thank you. You may never hear that from them, but just know somewhere tonight you affected somebody and they thank you. So on their behalf, they can't tell it to you. Thank you for what you poured into the atmosphere tonight. It is greatly appreciated. So thank you, ladies. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I do.
Thank you.
It's late. I know. Don't kill me. But yeah, so I really.
Yeah, I'm on Eastern Standard Time. It's 11:15.
Oh, you know what? We're not far from you. We're not. We on Eastern. Well, is everybody on Eastern?
Oh, you guys are on Eastern. Oh, I thought you were on Central.
Oh no.
Oh.
No, I would
Oh,
borrow
I think
Central
that's why
time.
it was at 9:00 because you were only 8:00.
Nah. That's, you know what? We're moving to 8:00 as of tomorrow. So yeah, for all of you people listening, we're moving to 8:00 instead of 9:00. Moving as of June 1. So with that being said,
Well,
I love
I'll be
you,
back
ladies.
for the next time.
Oh, I know, right? You'll be happy, but the 8:00. I appreciate y'all. You have a wonderful night. I will be sharing this link with you guys. Mwah to you too.
Thank
It's been a
you.
pleasure. And thank
This
you for your
has been
time.
an absolute pleasure. Thank you all.
Night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say, we came on and we were here. We were here unpacking. And you know how it is when you move, right? When you move, you're always unpacking. There's that box over there you forgot about. It's the box that might be in your car. And you're like, oh, I got to bring it in. And that's that box. Like we just recently moved, right? And so I'm looking like a couple of things over there. I'm like, okay, we need to unpack that. We'll get to it. But tonight, I know we went over a lot. But it was worth it. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it starts to unravel things, unpacking and pulling back layers of things that's untalked about. Sometimes you got to navigate on waters that's choppy, and sometimes it's smooth. It just kind of depends on what kind of boat you on, right? So with that being said, I appreciate you, ladies and gentlemen, for your viewing time. Some of you probably got him on and you had to go off, but you'll be back. We're moving, as I said earlier before the ladies left, we're moving to 8:00. Yes. So Wind Down Wednesdays on Spotify and Anchor.fm and all the other platforms. We are moving to 8:00. I'm super excited. And Tap In Tuesday starting next week, ladies and gentlemen, we will be here at 8:00. Shout out to Faith Flyers. Let me make sure I got that right. Flyers by Faith, I believe it is. This young queen did my flyers, and I can't wait to release it tonight. But we are moving. Definitely, I will be sharing that tonight, right after I get through Flyers by Faith. She designed my flyers that you're getting ready to see tonight to show that we are moving to 8:00 as of tomorrow, June 1, Wind Down Wednesday. It's a great show. And the topic for that show is, do you love yourself? Right? And that's a rhetorical question. I hope that the answer is yes, but I do know some people are struggling with that, and some people might not. But I hope that after you hear the show tomorrow night on Anchor.fm or Spotify, or go right to my website, ttfromthed.com, that you will learn to love yourself. Because guess what? If you love you, you are capable and able to love other people. That is fact. So with that being said, it's your girl, TT from the D, and I'll see you soon. Bye.